All right, ladies and gentlemen, 1.2 involvement and participation of Canada and Mexico in the Second World War. Second chapter in this unit on World War II in the Americas. Now, if we are moving in, it is important to understand that all countries in the Americas are eventually going to declare war on the Axis. It's just going to take them a different amount of time for most of the countries, starting with Canada being the first to declare war in 1939, ending with Argentina declaring war about 40 days before the war in Europe officially ends. Only the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil are actually going to send military forces into battle. The other countries are going to declare war. However, they're not actually going to be sending troops into battle. They're going to declare war and pretty much just make sure they're maintaining and defending the Americas, okay? So they're going to be playing crucial roles. However, they're not going to actually be fighting in battles like the British, or like the Americans, Canadians, Mexicans, and Brazilians. These nations right here, too, are the only ones that are going to be directly attacked, with the exception of Canada. Okay, Canada was not directly attacked by the Germans or the Japanese. However, the United States, Brazil, and Mexico were, as we've already talked about before. So that's going to be the major reason these countries are going to actually send military forces into battle versus just declaring war. Of these four countries, the United States and Canada are going to play a major role in the war effort. Brazil and Mexico are mostly just protecting themselves and ensuring they're protecting the rest of the Americas. That's not to mitigate the role of the Mexicans and the Brazilians in this war. However, it is important to understand it was much less significant than the United States and Canada in terms of influencing the outcome of the war in general. Now, Canada is going to have the second largest participation rate of any country in the war, meaning there are a lot of Canadians who are willing to fight and willing to get involved and to defend Canada and to fight against the Axis. They're going to have the fourth largest surface fleet and the third largest air force by the end of the war. So remember, we're talking earlier how the Canadian military was fairly small and unprepared. That's going to really change by the end of World War II, making the Canadians a much more powerful country and giving them a lot more negotiation power when it comes to the end of the war. Canadians are going to be fighting in both theaters. They're not just going to be fighting in the Atlantic and in Europe. They're also going to be fighting in the Pacific and in Asia as well. Initially, they're unprepared for war, and they are not ready to get involved in this situation or in this conflict because they have outdated equipment in 1939, and they've only got 45,000 men a part of their military. We already talked about the reason for the outdated equipment. It was the middle of the Great Depression, and it was not popular to be spending money on your military, and they really didn't have that money to spend anyways. They did not have a lot of men involved in the war effort as well. However, that's going to start changing as the war goes on. People who are going to be joining the Canadian military and fighting in the war because they feel that participation in the war is going to further their belief in Canadianization, which is this Canadian identity. It's kind of like Canadian nationalism, really, if you were to explain it probably in the most simple way right through here. Canada has just recently, not recently, but fairly recently become completely independent from the United Kingdom. Okay, they want to kind of build their own identity. They want to stand up and say, this is what we are. We might be the United Kingdom's little brother, but we're Canada. We're our own country right here. We need to stand up and show what it means to be Canadian. Those from Quebec are going to be reluctant to enter the war effort in Europe. Now, this is going to speak heavily when it comes to understanding the difference between French-speaking Canada and English-speaking Canada. There is going to be a major cultural shift. We've already talked about this briefly with the French and Indian War back in the 1700s, the French colonized portion of Canada and then the British colonized portion of Canada. French Canadians identify differently than English-speaking Canadians, and that's going to cause a number of issues in Canadian history, which we'll talk about a little bit more getting later on to this unit and getting into some of the later units as well. But do understand that the French Canadians from Quebec, okay, those who speak, or Canadians who spoke French, were much less likely to get involved in this crisis than those Canadians who speak English. Questions, comments, put it down below. Otherwise, I will see you later. Good luck.